After 10 years of being treated like an outsider, the sting of exclusion never really left me. Back then, my so-called friends would organize summer trips to the coast, sun, waves, and laughter. They'd post their smiling group photos online, always without me. Sometimes they would forget to invite me. Other times, they'd pretend the group was already full. I told myself it didn't matter, but every summer, when I scrolled through their pictures while sitting in my cramped apartment, it cut deep. I worked harder, promising myself that one day I'd build a life so far beyond theirs that their absence wouldn't even register. Fast forward a decade, through relentless work, sleepless nights, and taking risks no one believed in, I finally made it. My business took off, and with that success came opportunities. One day, while searching for a new investment, I stumbled across a beachfront resort up for sale. It wasn't just any resort, it was the exact beach where they always held their yearly gatherings. My pulse quickened. It felt like fate had delivered the perfect stage for the closure I'd been waiting for. Without hesitation, I signed the papers. Just like that, I owned the entire resort they once used to exclude me from. Owning it wasn't enough. I wanted them to see me standing on the very ground they thought I didn't belong to. So I did something bold. I sent out a special invitation for a private beachfront reunion to all the old group members. They had no idea I was behind it. Curiosity worked its magic, and nearly all of them accepted. The day they arrived, I stood at the entrance in a tailored suit, the sea breeze behind me, the keys to their old summer kingdom dangling from my hand. Their jaws dropped. I could see recognition dawn on their faces, mixed with disbelief. The silence that followed was sweeter than any words. "Welcome," I said, my voice steady but laced with all the weight of the past 10 years. "To my resort." Some tried to laugh it off. Others muttered awkward congratulations, but I could see the unease in their eyes. The tables had turned, and this time, I was the one deciding who got to stay. I could feel their nervous energy as they stepped inside. The once confident group who used to strut around the beach like they owned it now looked uncertain, shifting glances between one another as if silently asking, "Is this really happening?" I led them through the lobby, deliberately taking my time. The marble floors gleamed under the warm light. The ocean view stretched endlessly behind glass walls, and the staff, my staff, stood ready at attention. Every detail screamed of the success they never believed I would achieve. "You remember how you never had room for me back then?" I said casually, turning to face them. "Funny thing is, now this entire place has more rooms than you'll ever need, and every one of them belongs to me." They laughed nervously, some forcing smiles, but no one dared say a word. I handed each of them a room key. They accepted them like they were holding something heavier than metal, like each key carried the weight of 10 years of guilt. Later that evening, I hosted a private dinner on the terrace. The waves crashed softly against the shore as the sun sank into the horizon, painting the sky with gold and crimson. The long table was set with fine silverware, dishes prepared by a world-class chef, and bottles of wine older than any of our friendships. I stood at the head of the table, raising a glass. "To friendships," I said, letting the word linger. Fragile things, aren't they? Easy to break, hard to rebuild. Their faces flushed. Some lowered their eyes. One of them, David, the one who used to lead the group in mocking me, cleared his throat. "Look, man, we were kids. We didn't mean to." I cut him off. "Oh, you meant every bit of it. Don't sugarcoat the past. But that's fine, because tonight, you're my guests, and you'll stay here exactly as long as I allow." The air turned cold despite the tropical breeze. They finally realized this wasn't just a reunion, it was a reckoning. The dinner dragged on with a tense silence clinging to every bite. Forks scraped plates. Wine glasses clinked softly. But no one dared make small talk. I let the discomfort settle, enjoying the irony 10 years ago. I was the one left out, eating alone. Now they sat together, but isolation weighed heavier on them than it ever did on me. When dessert was served, I leaned back and fixed my gaze on them. "Do you remember the summer of 2015? I asked. "You all rented that cabin by the shore and told me there wasn't enough space." Funny, because I later saw photos. 6 bedrooms, 8 of you. That math never made sense. A few shifted in their seats. One of the women, Claire, tried to smile. "We were immature." It was stupid, but that was years ago. Years ago, I repeated slowly. And yet, here we are. The memories didn't fade for me. They carved themselves into who I became. Every late night I worked, every risk I took, I kept replaying those summers. David, always the loudest back then, slammed his glass down. "All right, enough. So we were jerks. You got rich, congratulations. But what's the point of this? To rub it in our faces, I stood, walking around the table, each step echoing against the wood. No, David, the point is balance. Life has a way of circling back. Tonight, for once, you're sitting at my table, and you'll listen. The group exchanged glances. Some looked ashamed, others angry, but none spoke up. I let the silence deepen until only the sound of the waves filled it. Finally, I smiled. Tomorrow morning, I've arranged something special. A little taste of what I used to feel. Consider it an experiment. Their unease grew, but I didn't elaborate. I wanted them to lie awake in those luxury rooms, wondering what awaited them. For the first time, it was their turn to feel excluded, uncertain, and powerless. Morning light spilled through the resort's wide glass windows, warming the marble floors. I had barely slept, but it didn't matter. I'd been waiting for this day for 10 years. My staff moved with quiet efficiency, setting up the terrace for what looked like another lavish breakfast. But this time, the seating arrangement wasn't so simple. When my former friends arrived, they looked worn. Some had clearly argued late into the night. Others carried that hollow-eyed guilt they couldn't drink away. They expected eggs, fruit, and coffee. Instead, they found place cards with their names carefully arranged and one card missing. "Wait," Claire said, scanning the table. "There's not enough seats." I folded my arms, standing at the head of the table. "Exactly. One of you doesn't belong." "That is the Arkham." Confusion spread across their faces. Some muttered under their breath. Others chuckled nervously, thinking it was a joke. "You remember how you told me that same thing?" I asked. "That there wasn't space for me? That the trip was already full?" I decided to recreate the experience. "This time, one of you gets to feel it." The air went still. I could see the panic flicker between them. Who would it be? No one moved toward the empty space at the edge. "Go on," I said smoothly. "Decide amongst yourselves. Someone will eat alone this morning. Someone will be left out." David groaned. "This is ridiculous." "Is it?" I shot back. "It was ridiculous 10 years ago, too. But it still happened, didn't it?" They started arguing, voices overlapping. Accusations from the past bubbled up, old grudges, half-forgotten betrayals. The perfect mask of their friendship cracked right there on the terrace. I watched, silent, letting them tear into each other. At last, Claire pushed back her chair and stood. "Fine, I'll do it, if it'll end this childish game." I smiled. "Enjoy your private breakfast, Claire. Alone, just like I did, year after year." The staff escorted her to a small table by the far end of the terrace, isolated, the sound of the waves swallowing her protests. The others sat in uncomfortable silence, every bite of food heavy with the reminder that their cruelty had finally circled back. The tension from breakfast carried long after the plates were cleared. I let them stew in their guilt, giving them time to wander the resort. They explored the pools, the private beach, the spa, but everywhere they went, there was a reminder that it all belonged to me. Their laughter, once effortless and loud, now came strained and brittle. By afternoon, I called them back to the lounge. They gathered reluctantly, curiosity and unease mixing on their faces. I stood by the large windows where the ocean stretched endlessly, its waves crashing like a slow drumbeat. "Do you know what it felt like?" I began. "To sit at home while you all soaked in the sun, knowing I'd never be part of your world? Every excuse, every lie about not having room, it branded itself into me. You all thought it was harmless fun, but it was a wound that never closed." No one spoke. Even David kept his mouth shut this time. "So today," I continued, "you're going to get a taste of that silence, the kind that crushes you from the inside." I gestured to the staff, who began removing phones, wallets, and keys from their hands. "For the next 24 hours, you'll stay here. No contact with the outside world. No distractions. Just yourselves. The same way I spent summers trapped, watching your lives from a distance." Claire's face paled. "You can't just take our stuff." "I can." I cut her off, my voice sharp but calm. "Because this is my resort. And you're not guests, you're participants." They looked at one another, panic spreading, but none dared openly rebel. The power dynamic had shifted too far. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "Consider it a mirror. For once, you'll know how it feels to be left powerless." Then I walked out, leaving them in stunned silence as the sound of the waves filled the room, swallowing their protests. By nightfall, the cracks were starting to show. With no phones, no escape, and nothing to distract them, the group was left with only each other and their memories. I watched from the security cameras in my office, sipping a glass of wine as their polished facades crumbled. David paced like a caged animal, muttering under his breath. Claire sat apart, arms crossed, her eyes red from tears. She didn't want anyone to see. The others tried to whisper, but those whispers turned into sharp arguments. Old grievances surfaced, things that had clearly been buried for years but never resolved. At one point, Mark snapped. "You think I forgot how you stole my girlfriend back then, David? You were always the loudest, the cruelest, and we all just followed because we were too scared to be next." David roared back. "Don't put this on me." You all laughed along, every single time. None of you stood up for him. The room fell into heavy silence. They knew he was right. I leaned closer to the monitor, a bitter satisfaction rising in my chest. For years they had acted like their cruelty was harmless, like it disappeared once the summer ended. Now it was unraveling them from the inside. Later, I walked in quietly. They all looked up, startled, as though caught doing something shameful. I let the silence stretch before speaking. "You see," I said softly, "when you strip away the distractions, when you take away the noise, you're forced to face yourselves. And the truth is, you were never friends. You were accomplices in cruelty." No one argued. Even David dropped his eyes. I turned toward the door. "Tomorrow morning, I'll give you one last chance to speak to me, to each other. Choose wisely what you say, because once you leave this place, there won't be another chance." I left them there in silence, the ocean's roar pounding just beyond the glass. The night dragged on like a storm that never broke. I didn't sleep. I wanted them to stew in the same kind of sleepless isolation I once endured. By dawn, I stepped onto the terrace where the group waited, their faces pale, their clothes rumpled, their voices hoarse from arguments that lasted long into the night. I sat at the head of the table once again, the ocean behind me, the rising sun blazing like a spotlight. "This is your chance," I said calmly. "Say what you need to say, to me or to each other, but don't waste it." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, Claire finally broke the silence. Her voice trembled. "I'm sorry. I don't even remember who started it, but I know I went along. I knew it was wrong, but it was easier to laugh than to be the one laughed at." Tears streaked her face. "I can't take back what I did, but I regret it. Every single day." One by one, others followed. Mark admitted he had always felt guilty, but never had the courage to speak up. A couple of them confessed they hadn't thought twice about me back then, that I was simply out of sight, out of mind. Their apologies weren't rehearsed. They came raw, tangled with shame and guilt. But David predictably refused to bow. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "This is pathetic. He's got you all crawling. We were kids. We messed around. Get over it. Look at him now. He's rich, successful, and clearly still obsessed with us. Who really won here?" The group flinched at his words, but none dared to agree with him. I studied him for a moment, then leaned forward, my voice dropping low. "You think this is about obsession?" "No, David. This is about closure. And you just proved what I always knew, that you never change." The others shifted uncomfortably, their shame deepening under his arrogance. I stood slowly, pushing my chair back. "I'll decide what happens next, after I hear everything. But David, your time is running out." His smirk faltered for the first time. David's smirk lingered for a few seconds longer, but I could see the cracks in his mask. He was cornered. His friends had turned inward, admitting their guilt, while he was the only one still clinging to the past. I walked slowly toward him. "Tell me, David," I said evenly, "why are you the loudest when you're the most afraid? Back then, you hid behind laughter. Now, you hide behind arrogance. But underneath it, you're the same insecure boy who needed to push someone else down to feel taller." His jaw clenched. "You don't know anything about me." "Oh, but I do," I said softly. "You made me study you. Every insult, every smirk, every time you led the pack, it was a performance. And here's the truth you never wanted anyone to know." I paused, letting the silence cut like a knife. "Without an audience, you're nothing." The group shifted uncomfortably. David's face flushed, and for the first time, he looked around for support. No one met his eyes. I gestured toward the staff, who brought out a single chair and placed it at the far edge of the terrace, facing the ocean, but isolated from the rest. "That was my seat for years, alone, watching you all have fun. Now it's yours." David laughed bitterly, but there was no power in it. "You can't be serious." I leaned close so only he could hear. "Sit down, David, or walk out now and know every single one of them. will remember this moment, the moment you couldn't face what you did. His smirk collapsed. Slowly, stiffly, he stood and walked to the chair. The others watched in silence as he sat, shoulders tense, his bravado stripped away. For the first time, David looked small. I turned back to the group. This is how balance feels. This is what justice looks like. The waves crashed, filling the silence that followed. The waves roared behind us, steady and unrelenting, as David sat stiffly in the lone chair. He tried to stare out at the ocean as though it didn't matter, but his fists clenched so tight his knuckles whitened. The group avoided looking at him, the shame of their own confession still hanging in the air. I let the silence drag. Silence was my weapon now, the same weapon they had once used against me. Back then, it was the silence of being excluded, ignored, erased. Now, it was the silence that forced them to face themselves. Finally, I broke it. Do you feel it, David? The emptiness? The sound of laughter behind you that you're not a part of? That's the world I lived in for years. He shifted uncomfortably, but his pride wouldn't let him answer. His jaw was locked, his eyes fixed on the horizon as if staring hard enough could erase me. The others glanced between us, uneasy. Claire finally whispered, "Maybe he's had enough." And App and I turned to her, my voice sharp. Did anyone ever say that about me? Did anyone ever stop and think, maybe he's had enough? No. You kept laughing, year after year. Her lips trembled, but she didn't speak again. I moved closer to David. You've built your whole life on control, on making others smaller. But here's the truth, you were never strong. You were just loud. And loudness doesn't last. For the first time, I saw it, his facade slipping. His shoulders sagged, his face pinched, and his eyes glistened, though he fought to keep them steady. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The smirk was gone. The group sat frozen, watching the man who had once led them with arrogance sit alone, stripped bare in front of the very person he tried to erase. I straightened, letting my voice carry. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about truth. And the truth is, you all created this moment. I just gave it back to you. The weight of those words sank heavy into the terrace. No one dared move. No one dared breathe too loud. David's shoulders tightened at my words, and for a moment I thought he might finally collapse into the apology that had been clawing its way up his throat. His lips parted, his chest rose with a shaky breath, but instead of words of remorse, he snapped. He shot to his feet, sending the chair clattering against the stone. Enough. Ugh, he barked, his voice cracking under the strain. You think this makes you better than us? You think owning this place, humiliating us, makes up for anything? You're pathetic. You've been holding on to a grudge for 10 years. 10 years! And you call us the cruel ones? The group flinched at his outburst, but no one interrupted. They wanted to see where this would go. I stayed calm, even as he towered over me, red-faced and shaking. No, David, I said evenly. What makes me better is that I don't need to break someone else to feel whole. What makes me better is that I took the pain you gave me and turned it into something you can't take away. His fists clenched. For a split second, I thought he might swing. The air was so tight it felt like even the ocean had gone silent. But then something broke in him. His anger faltered. His voice cracked, and he collapsed back into the chair, burying his face in his hands. His body shook not from rage anymore, but from something far deeper. The others stared, wide-eyed, as the man who had once been untouchable finally cracked in front of them. A muffled sob escaped him. For the first time, David wasn't the loudest in the room. He was the weakest. I let the moment stretch, then spoke softly. This is what you've all been running from. The truth. That your cruelty had a cost. That it left scars. And now, you can't outrun it anymore. No one dared move. No one dared breathe too loud. The reckoning had arrived. The silence after David's collapse was heavier than anything I had planned. He sat hunched, his hands over his face, his shoulders trembling. No one laughed. No one mocked him. The same people who once followed his lead now stared at him like they didn't even recognize the man in front of them. Then Claire spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. We heard him, David. All of us. And we never cared. We thought it was harmless, but it wasn't. Look at what we did. Hey botters, provetters by do night. Her eyes flicked toward me, glassy with tears. Look at what we made him carry. The others shifted, their guilt etched into their faces. One by one, they started speaking. Mark admitted he used to feel proud of being part of the inner circle, even when he knew it came at my expense. Another confessed she had always admired me from afar, but laughed with the group because she was afraid of being pushed out too. The words poured out like poison, finally draining from a wound. The terrace became a confessional, each of them unraveling. admitting truths they had buried for a decade. Some cried openly, some shook their heads in disbelief at their younger selves, but none tried to excuse it anymore. I stood quietly, listening. This was what I had wanted, not just their shame, but their honesty. For years, I had been invisible. Now every one of them saw me clearly. When the last confession faded, I stepped forward. My voice was steady. You've carried your secrets. I carried the scars. Today, it all comes into the light. I paused, letting the sound of the waves punctuate my words. But light is a choice. Either you walk out of here still clinging to who you were, or you walk out changed. The group sat frozen, absorbing the weight of it. Even David, face streaked with tears, lifted his head slowly. His eyes were bloodshot, hollow, but there was something new in them, something that looked dangerously close to surrender. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't the outsider. I was the one who set the rules, who decided how this story ended. The ocean wind whipped across the terrace as I stood before them, their confessions still echoing in the air. They looked broken, stripped of the armor they had once worn so proudly. For a moment, I just let the silence stretch, tasting the power of it. This was the moment I had imagined for 10 years. The moment when they finally felt what I had felt. I could have left them there. I could have turned my back, walked away, and let their guilt rot inside them forever. Part of me wanted that revenge without mercy. But as I stared at their weary faces, something inside me shifted. I took a deep breath. You know, I began slowly, I thought this would fix me. That watching you all suffer would erase the pain. But the truth is, revenge doesn't heal. It only feeds the wound. Their eyes lifted, confused. Some hopeful, some doubtful. I can't rewrite the past. I can't erase the summers I spent alone while you laughed without me. But I can decide how this ends. And it won't end with me becoming what you once were. I looked directly at David, who still sat hunched and trembling. You wanted me to stay bitter, to drown in anger. But I won't, because I am not you. I turned back to the group, my voice steady but softer now. So here's the truth. You don't owe me your tears, your apologies, or your shame. You owe yourselves the chance to be better. If you walk away from here unchanged, then this was all for nothing. A hush fell over the terrace. Some of them cried quietly. Others bowed their heads. Even David, broken, raw, couldn't summon a response. I let out a long breath I didn't know I'd been holding. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest loosened. Your stay is over, I said finally. Leave. The resort belongs to me, but the rest of your lives still belong to you. Don't waste them. I turned and walked back into the resort, leaving them on the terrace with the waves crashing below. Whether they changed or not was no longer my burden. The morning sun was high by the time they gathered their things. My staff returned their phones and wallets, but none of them seemed eager to check messages or scroll through screens. They moved slowly, quietly, as though each step carried the weight of everything that had just happened. I stood at the balcony above the lobby, watching them file out. No one spoke. The same group that once roared with laughter and excluded me without a second thought now left in silence, shadows of who they used to be. It was strange 10 years ago. I would have given anything to be included. Today, I realized I didn't need them anymore. One by one, they passed through the doors. Some glanced up at me briefly, shame written in their eyes. But none could hold my gaze for long. Even David, once the loudest voice, walked out with his head bowed, the fight drained from him. And then, Claire lingered. She stopped at the door, turned, and looked up at me. You may never forgive us, she said softly, but I want you to know I'll never forget this. Not what we did, and not what you showed us here. I didn't answer. I just nodded once. That was enough. When the last of them was gone, I stepped out onto the empty terrace. The ocean stretched wide and endless before me, the sound of waves crashing like a heartbeat that belonged only to me. For the first time in a decade, I didn't feel the ache of being left out. I felt whole. The resort was mine. My silence was mine. My future was mine. And as the horizon shimmered with light, I finally understood closure wasn't about making them suffer. It was about reclaiming the part of myself they tried to take away. And I had done it.